Thanks, guys. Yeah, thank you. Listen, it's time for our financial talk this morning. We've got Kate Brown, the director at Fiscal Private Client Services, and we're talking about something that a lot of people don't really think about, and that is saving for your grandchildren, how to ensure that your grandchildren one day will have a financially secure future. Something very, very interesting. Kate, thank you so much for joining us, and good morning to you.
Good morning to you, and morning to your viewers.
So, Kate, do you find that in your practice, is that something that many people think about, saving for their grandkids, something way long in the future?
I think many grandparents are concerned for their grandchildren's future. Some do save specifically for that, but not many do it specifically. They would, however, regard much of their own savings as something that would be passed on within the family. And that would be either helping their grandchildren directly or by helping their own children, which would enable them to make more funds available for their own children.
Yeah. Is the general view, I mean, you look at what's happening right now in the country with the fees must fall movement,
Yes.
education being a very, very important cornerstone of securing your future. Are many people saving for their grandchildren for the purposes of providing for their education?
Well, I can't speak for the nation. But
just in your practice?
In our practice, we would have some people who do save. I think what's very important to remember is that if you have more resources, you can create more opportunities, or your children and grandchildren can take advantage of more opportunities. So a simple example would be if your child is doing history, grandchild is doing history from a trick, and there's an opportunity through the school to go on an overseas tour, or let's say they're doing European history, or if we've been decolonized and we're doing African history. It would be really interesting to be able to go with a school party to visit another part of Africa and learn about that part of the continent. But by being there, not out of a book and not off the internet, it makes a huge difference. And those kind of school trips can be really transforming for people.
Yeah. I think it's just what you said off camera before we started the interview, that it's about making sure that your children, your grandchildren perhaps, can utilize those opportunities, be able to make the most of them, because you might have a fund like NSFAS that provides funding for the basics of what you need to go to tertiary, but it doesn't provide for all the other extra things that are necessary, like laptops, like computers and things like that.
Yes, I think there are many things that students would like to have, but they don't necessarily have to have in order to get their degree. But there are lots of things where if they have better equipment, better books, more access to bandwidth, for example, in different places, then they can do better. They can take better advantage of the opportunities they have.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue with our conversation with Kate Brown very shortly. We're talking about saving for your grandchildren in today's financial chat. But there's still lots more to come on your Feel Good Breakfast show. Over to Graham and you and Zoe.
Thanks, Kat. Well, you know what? Earlier we saw that shark, stepping on a Lego photo. And whoever said that Legos is just for kids, they are probably losing their mind right now, because the next tech story will leave your mind boggled. So petrol heads and Lego fans, they unite and marvel at this enthusiast, fully functional scale model of a V8 engine. Now, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So the 32-valve four-stroke engine, it does not combust, thankfully. But for a Lego model, it pretty much does everything else.
It's insane. It was created by YouTube content creator NZ Construction Studio. And the build is mainly of Lego Technic pieces. So Technic, for the uninitiated, is a subset of Lego of their building system, which focuses more on machinery. So it includes gears, axles, cogs, pistons, and pretty much everything that you need to make an engine. But the difficulty here, of course, comes in putting it all together, which I imagine requires a great deal of patience and possibly very tiny little hands if you had like a team of people helping. So one big feature and big difference between the engine and the engine that runs in our cars, besides being made of plastic, is that unlike most engines which create energy, this one consumes it, so it needs a battery to run. But it's powered by a motor and a battery from Lego's Power Functions. But that is a marvel of miniature modern technology, I think we can call it. But I love the fact that this was not some massive engineer out there. This was a YouTube content creator doing something that inspires the imagination, but you can see all of the tiny little working pieces. I'd love to know how many actual pieces went
into making that. Absolutely incredible.
Awesome stuff. Well, maybe you've created something. You're a Lego aficionado and you want to boast a little bit. You can hit us up on our Expresso Morning Show Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, perhaps you'd want to save up for your grandchildren so that you can buy them fancy Lego toys like that. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about saving up for your grandchildren. We've got Kate Brown, Director at Fiscal Private Client Services. Thank you once again for joining us. So considering that when we talk about saving for your grandchildren, it's a very long-term investment, because sometimes you might not even see this investment come to fruition, right? When should one start saving up?
The sooner the better. Mm-hmm. Because if you start saving even relatively small amounts early on, you get the benefit of compounding returns.
Yes.
That means that in year one, you put in some money, you earn a return, and you plough that back into the investment. Mm-hmm. So in year two, you invest a little more, and you've got what you had last year,
yes,
and what you earned on last year's money. And then the same happens in year two. At the end of that year, you capitalize those returns. Mm-hmm. And that helps you get what are called returns that follow an exponential curve. They
yes,
go up at an increasingly faster rate.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking at if a child is born and you start saving the day the child is born, by the time they're going to university, you will have had returns that have been compounding for 18 years.
Wow, and that could be a great return indeed.
Yes. That's also why you should save for your retirement early as well.
Absolutely.
With your first paycheck.
With your very first paycheck. Yes. How about that? Even as a waiter, earning your very first wages.
As anything.
Start there.
And when you have holiday jobs, save half, spend half.
I like that. I like that. But let's talk about the correct and the appropriate kind of investment vehicles that you should be using to get that kind of exponential curve growth.
Okay. Now, this is quite technical. Mm-hmm. Because people who are in households which have an income below 180,000 a year mm-hmm. can make use of the Fundisa investment. And anybody who has access to the internet can Google Fundisa and they can find out all about that. Mm-hmm. But there is a huge advantage in that there are sponsors of these investments who declare a very generous annual bonus. Okay. And it means you get a very good investment return on the amount that you invest that year. Mm-hmm. So Fundisa is something for people to look at. And as we mentioned earlier, even if Fees Must Fall succeeds and there is free education for a very large proportion of people in South Africa at tertiary level, they will still need other things. So that's for people coming from households with a lower income.
Yes.
For those who have a high tax rate or have lots of assets, tax-free savings accounts are a possibility. For those who haven't yet utilised their full interest exemption and capital gains tax exemptions, they might just use a unit trust.
Okay.
For somebody who's from a wealthy background who wants to save a lot of money and is using unit trusts, using the tax-free savings account, they might also make use of an endowment.
Okay.
So it's really a case of if you have a reasonable amount to save, mm-hmm. it's good to get advice and be clear about what you're trying to do and why you're choosing that investment. Mm-hmm. A lot of it has to do with tax.
Of course.
The other part is to do with how personally disciplined you are with your money. So if you're saving for your grandchildren, but then you decide to gooi a bit out for a little bit of a holiday or a bit of a holiday.
Okay, well, and even grandparents deserve a treat every now and then.
It's not going to be there for the main purpose. So yeah. It's important to be highly motivated and feel comfortable about the amount you're saving so that you don't feel tempted to raid that capital as it's trying to get up that path of the exponential curve.
All right, I tell you what, let's just hold on to that thought for a second. We're going to take a little bit of a break from our conversation, but we will continue. Kate Brown is still here, Director at Fiscal Private Client Services, talking to us about how to go about saving for your grandchildren. We'll be right back with that shortly.